Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Fire Emblem, Crimson Flower in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 36, Reconciling a Heavy Loss. Once the mist had fully cleared, and the enemies had fully fallen or surrendered, and the remaining allies were safely secured, everyone had made their way back. Still, they were in low spirits. This was not like their prior mission. Today, not a single one of the students saw complete satisfaction in their victory. Once their adrenaline had ceased, there was an element of powerlessness in their victory. "This is so annoying," Casper bellowed angrily, shifting his head onto the ground in guilt. Of all the people we had to get rid of, why was it them? The rest could only listen in empathy. Looking across the rest of her class, Bernadetta wondered. "Hey. I've been thinking." It was not often she spoke. Everyone else had looked over her in this seemingly rare moment. What if our mission at the Red Canyon was a one-off? We killed innocent people today, but it felt so much more different than before. Back then, we felt bad about it, sure, but they were bandits. "So you're saying they deserved to die?" Hubert inquired bluntly. "No, I mean dash. It helps to take a more objective stance, you know. No matter how you look at it, the people we fought today were different to the ones at Xanadu. They didn't deserve their end. They chose to see to it that their life would end in the way it did." In saying this, the rest of the class made a sudden realization. You can hide it all you want, but ultimately the ones we fought today had died choosing to fight us. They have only themselves to blame. Hearing this, Bernadetta had no refutable arguments to make. Looking at her bow, she wondered aloud. Are all of our missions going to be like this? Nobody had an answer. Feeling betrayed by her expectations, Bernadetta simply gritted her teeth. After some time, a hand had touched her shoulder. "We are all feeling the sadness today," Petra consoled. "The truth will be dash," she stammered, but did not let her lack of knowledge of the language stop her. "The truth is, we do not know." Looking at Petra, she saw a solemn smile. It was clear she had not been completely cured of her worries, but looking at her peer trying to remain optimistic had calmed Bernadetta. "I know we shouldn't sweat too much on it all," Casper acknowledged. "I just need some time to process what just happened is all." "We all do, Casper. Believe me when I say you're not the only one." Dorothea, who had chosen to remain silent during this exchange, had agreed with her friend. Everyone continued their trip in solemn silence. Their walk back had many thoughts to be focused towards. Looking elsewhere, Edelgard noticed Byleth in front of her. She paced herself to converse with him. "Professor, everyone's not feeling as ready as they were before the mission." Noticing her, Byleth added his own thoughts. "Death is a brutal subject." Thinking back, he recounted old memories. "I have been told I was fortunate to not be shaken by it in my old line of work. I am sure not everyone can be as calm during this time." "How do you view it, then?" Edelgard inquired. "You're right. Death is a fickle subject, but how are you able to properly get through it, knowing you're killing potentially innocent lives? They chose this path, and I was simply given the task of dispatching them. There is nothing more to it." Edelgard found this fascinating. Never before had she met someone with such an objective stance before. "And what of you? Why do you not count yourself alongside your class?" Thinking back on everything, Edelgard spoke to herself. A life lost is not always a death in vain. Change can't be brought peacefully either. I think the people of the nearby village acted upon those beliefs. To them, if they helped someone progress even a little further through their own failures, then they would find satisfaction in their untimely demise. Edelgard closed her eyes, fully aware her beliefs were not fully agreed upon by many. Sometimes, a sacrifice has to be made for the greater good. Byleth agreed. Silently looking towards the back of the class, he asked once more. "So you are not shaken by these events?" "I am," she shot back. "But nothing can change what happened here today. We were simply made to fight a tragic battle." Much to his surprise, Edelgard's stance was just like his own. He was impressed by her maturity, but kept the thought to himself. Byleth was sure Edelgard was aware of this fact, so reiterating the truth would have been needless otherwise. When everyone had returned, it was up to the leaders in charge of the mission to report to Archbishop Rhea. Catherine was sure Billet must have had her own matters to attend to. Looking at her, she formally gave her best wishes. Let's ignore all that happened between us for now. For the first time, Billet looked up to address her. Look, I've already explained my piece in all this. I was jealous, and I still am. I can tell, though, you were ready to do your all as a professor in that battle. Maybe you are fit in some regards, but not so much in others. Just don't go causing trouble, and I won't pile my grievances on you. She nodded. Noticing she wished not to speak, Catherine gave a light smile and began making her way out. Wait. I wanted to ask something, if you don't mind, Billet spoke, cautiously. Shoot away. Are you not affected by any of this? She replied instantaneously, as if she had accepted her fate during this conflict. Having to report the alleged crimes of the man I loved, and then killing his own flesh and blood years later definitely took a toll on me, I'll admit. Billet looked up at this sharp statement. I'm sad. I really am, but I owe Lady Rhea a lot, and so I want to pay her back. In the eyes of the church, Lonato was a criminal. Long before today, I had to accept that as fact. How did you do it? I knew that Christoph's death would upset his family, it was a given. One day I might have been unfortunate enough to meet them, and if the day arose, then I suppose it would make sense they would want a hand thrown at me. I can't argue with that. Christoph's adopted brother, take care of him for us. Catherine began parting ways. You said it yourself, you're his friend. Don't go back on your word. By now, Catherine was almost out of earshot. Billet spoke her final goodbyes to her comrade. I won't. Looking elsewhere, she muttered. I never do. Making their way towards the Archbishop's central room, Catherine was pleasantly surprised to see Byleth had already been waiting for her return, alongside Rhea. Standing behind their leader was Seath, keenly inspecting the situation as a neutral presence. She stood beside the new professor, looking down at the ground as a sign of courtesy towards the Archbishop Rhea. Lady Rhea, Professor Billet had some urgent matters to attend to, so I'm afraid she won't be here for this meeting. Yes, Seath warned me as much, Rhea acknowledged. Who would have thought that she would go so far as to seek permission to leave on horseback far before the designated date? Looking towards her brother, Rhea noticed he was not bewildered by this predicament. We can settle her report for another date. In the meantime, was there anything of note from you both? Catherine had wanted to tell Rhea of her latest founding, but she signaled for Byleth to speak ahead. Taking her offer, he stepped forward. It would seem that Lonato had an influence across the nearby townspeople. The students had been brought into this predicament, and now some of our young pupils feel they have committed unlawful murder. I imagine it must have been quite difficult to adjust to this. Fear not, Professor. This is a common occurrence amongst the starting years. I'm sure you're aware the world is not the place of happiness you once thought. These students are slowly beginning to learn such things. It is only natural. Some were already keenly aware of that fact, Byleth commented. To that end, it might be plausible to assume that we may have some unique anomalies within my class. Rhea was slightly taken aback by this report, but she nodded her head in agreement. Looking towards Catherine, she motioned for Byleth to stand back so that his associate could speak. Catherine did as instructed, however she moved slightly closer to hand Seath the letter. Upon examining the contents, a look of concern crossed his face. How were you able to come across this? It was found in one of Lonato's pockets, she answered. It's a letter detailing the assassination of Archbishop Rhea, and as for the time, it's going to be towards the annual Goddess Rite of Rebirth festival next month. Immediately after saying this, the room exchanged looks of worry. Rhea simply closed her eyes for a prolonged period. Once they opened again, her solemn expression had turned to one of vexation. I see they had yet to unveil their true intentions until now. Looking towards Byleth, she narrowed her eyes. So be it. I have yet to play my true cards as well. In time they will be aware of the Central Church's rulings. Not everyone had been available for the meeting in Rhea's chambers. Crossing through the various school grounds, Billet had been busy trying to locate her friend. After putting away her coat in her room, eventually, she ultimately had to hazard a guess and approach the Blue Lion's dorm room with hesitant restraint. Upon seeing his label, she knocked on the door to Ash's dorm. It slowly made an opening for her. Seeing her face, Ash looked down slightly, still unaware of what to do in this scenario. Belette had little scratches on her face, and to him, it was as if she had never left the monastery to begin with. Rather than scars or wounds, her old smile had instead turned to one of a solemn expression. "I'm going to look really strange if I talk to you inside your room, so how's about we head out for a bit?" This was immediately followed by a sudden growl of the stomach. "Okay, so it seems apparently after coming back from a long journey you can also get really hungry. Good for us, I guess. I'm dying for a bite, so that's where we should probably talk, right?" Ash smiled lightly at this. She was still the same. Following her wishes, he fetched his shoes and the two made their way to the mess hall. "Don't you professors usually take students to offices and classes to have serious discussions?" "Yeah, but those situations don't account for our stomachs," Belette answered with little repose. "Also, have you met me? Brother and father's good at it, but I'm not one for the serious lifestyle." "I can see that." Looking towards him, Belette was happy to have seen his mood was less tense. The two made their way towards the mess hall, and after collecting their preferred dishes, they sat in a vacant spot. Luckily for them, it was far too late into the day for anyone to be occupying the area. "I'm surprised you got yourself food. Isn't it really late for that?" Ash now spoke in a lower tone. "I was too worried to be thinking about eating." Belette had stopped biting through her meat upon hearing this. She hesitated slightly, but she knew sitting and simply idling away would accomplish nothing for her friend. She had to bring the deadliest of news in the calmest of lights. Fortunately for Belette, empathy was her strongest asset. "Your dad's super cool." Ash was taken aback by this, but he smiled, agreeing with her statement. "Don't worry. The old man definitely didn't forget about you, but there was a whole lot more to it all." "Sorry, Ash. If anything, I'd have loved to tell this story without using present tenses." Now, he had been beginning to understand the pieces of her story. He had a stern look on his face. It was desperate, yet disheartened. "What happened, Belette? Tell me. That's why I'm here." There was no way to avoid the truth. After sighing to herself, she stopped thinking of her food altogether. "The reason he was doing all this was because of your brother, Christoph. The church executed him years ago, but he still felt angered about it, no matter how many years passed him." Thinking back to the battle, she spoke slowly. "I tried talking to him. I thought I was making progress, and he seemed like the type of man to be reasoned with. He stopped the whole battle just to hear me out. Earlier, I had asked a stable manager from a nearby town to let him know about me, so he expected me to come up to him. I learned he had his woes about the whole ordeal, but the reason he wanted to act now was to not get you involved. Eventually, it reached a point where he agreed to his arrest, and I promised him I'd do everything to make sure he could see you again. This doesn't match up with what I'm seeing now. He pushed me aside." Ash bit his lip before he could express any more anger towards the situation. "He tried to strike a colleague of mine, but only got himself damaged in the process." His final words, they were an apology on behalf of his actions. He had a hard time pulling himself together. He hid his face in embarrassment. Silence had befell the room. Belette did as she wanted, and attempted to reach her hand to comfort him. "I'm sorry, Ash. Those words don't change anything." She stopped attempting to reach him after hearing those words. "They never did. I used to scream those words 100 times over if I ever got caught during my thievery days, and no one would have listened to me." Pulling back her arms, Belette looked down at her food in regret. She was too taken aback to do anything more. "You're right. I did something uncalled for." Her earnestness had made him realize his own mistake. Whilst still sounding frustrated, he tried to choke out words of acknowledgement. "You did everything you could have, Professor, but that's what makes it so much harder to take in. I know, and I know it doesn't mean much, but I really wish I could have done more." Looking back up at her, He could see they were both equally frustrated. It did not matter their relation to Lonato, or their stations. What mattered was that they both wanted the same outcome. If everything you've said is true, then I'm happy you managed to get him to his senses, if only for a moment. He closed his eyes. My life has taught me that I should be grateful for everything that comes to me. No matter how much you wish it, sometimes things are out of your control, and this weekend was a grim reminder of that. Truthfully, Billet, I believed the entire time that you were away that I told the wrong person. I thought it was better for myself to be there. Still, I had to accept it. It frustrated me to no end that I poured my heart out to a random professor and didn't think to do anything myself, but then you came back. Billet looked up at Ash. The two finally connected again. I could tell when you knocked on my door that you had tried everything you could. You did it in the best way possible, and as much as it hurts, I'm thankful for that. I need time to accept this. Billet agreed. Finally eating her food in a calmed light, she acknowledged her own worries. I'm not satisfied with my work either. I'll improve and make sure this doesn't happen again. I promise. Whilst chewing, she gave Ash her deadliest of expressions, which was admittedly harder to pull off than she intended when food was in her mouth. This time, I promised I would do everything in my power to help you, but next time I'll promise that it'll be done without any worries or hesitation. It was the same feeling he had when she had taken her coat off before. Ash finally realized now that today, Billet had her coat away from her as well. Just like before, she spoke as friends, and not as his superior. You're a world of wonders, Billet. He, too, continued eating. I hope you don't change. After much of the day had ended, midnight was beginning to take its passing. Knocking on Sitha's door, Rhea came in. She could see the man was tiring away himself, but she admired his readiness to continue his duties. Make sure to take rest when you can, Sith. I can do so at another time, he replied, not looking up still. That letter is of great worry right now. I need to make sure I tighten security for the whole of next month. It could be for the Rite of Rebirth festival, or it might be for something else entirely. That letter was vague, but it should not be wholly trusted. I assumed as much. I'm glad we are on the same page. She sat down beside her advisor with a face of concern. Make sure to attend to Flane as well. I'm sure she gets lonely when you're like this. Yes, I've been meaning to. The girl has the willpower to hold on without me, but I need to check in on her when I am free. He slouched back from his chair, tired from the news he was given today. The students won't be enjoying themselves this month. I just hope we can resolve this issue before any more hindrances occur. It'll be a busy month for all of us. I'll be more keen to hear your advice so as not to worry you. Thank you. Upon realizing she successfully reassured him, Rhea stood up to leave. Before closing the door, she looked back once more. Good night, Sith. Farewell, Rhea. The door shut. Thinking back on it, Sith had ensured Billet was accommodated for before, however now he had little time to do so again. He just hoped that the new professors would hold their own for the coming month. Under any means possible, he had to ensure the Archbishop's safety. It did not matter what else they lost in the process. Rhea was the center of the church's rule, and with her gone, the reigns of Fodlan could have potentially ceased alongside her. Chapter 37, Distant Archer. It was announced soon after to the school that an important assembly would be held between all the classes, detailing what was to happen in the coming month. As there was still little information present about the situation at large, Sith allowed a day of rest once everyone had accomplished their missions. After which, classes would be held as usual on the day after their assembly. As for what happened behind the scenes during this rest period, that would be up to the staff to frantically prepare for the coming struggles ahead. It was towards evening that Billet could not achieve satisfactory rest. At first, it was simply meant to be a casual reading of the book, but eventually, she found she could not focus her eyes on the words. Once she resorted to sleeping to end the day, she found that her thoughts overclouded her desire to darken her surroundings. Eventually, she resorted to even calling for her brother and Suthis, to which she was disappointed to find that they had no need for her. Unsatisfied, she explored the monastery, going for a slow walking pace to admire the scenery. A lot was on her mind after Lonato, and recent additions such as her apology towards Ash did not help her in that regard. Nearby the church's great bridge, there lay chairs of rest for the passing students. Sitting down, she admired the sight of the large church before her. It was almost 2 months ago that she had questioned Ria during this time. Thinking back on it, her life had changed a lot just from saving Edelgard and her rivals. She was thankful for it. Admiring the sunset from afar, she remembered of her younger days of travel with her brother and father. They were too busy moving around to truly take in scenery, so even a simple changing of the day was dazzling enough for her. Belette then realized that being a professor would give her more chances to explore at her own pace. Feeling comforted by this fact, she daydreamed of her rising opportunities. Good evening. Wah. Springing from her chair, she found a certain green-haired girl chuckling at her. She did not expect Flame to appear here of all places, but considering it had been well over a few weeks since their last meeting, she smiled and made space for the two to sit alongside one another. How's it hanging, Flame? My. Your greetings never cease to amaze me, she said, shocked. Do you believe that if I were to properly attend the academy, then I would be able to actively learn of these new phrases? I've been told it's a Belette speciality of mine, but if you were in my class, I'd definitely teach them to you. You may need to speak to my brother about that, then. Seath. Indeed. Not a chance. She shuddered. I'm getting used to being around the guy, but even asking him to leave the monastery was nerve-wracking. Flame gave an expression of understanding. After which, she proceeded to gaze at the sunset as well. My brother has a reputation for being very protective towards me. It is why I've yet to have many conversations with individuals of the opposite sex. Huh. Is something amiss? Nothing. I'm just lucky I'm a twin. Having an older brother sounds horrible. You do not need to tell me twice. A saddened face came across Flame. Belette, noticing she had put her small friend down, ruffled her hair slightly. She found her small stature incredibly amusing, and as such, had grappled onto her more than she would have liked to admit. Gosh, how old are you? She prodded on her cheeks. I miss being as small as you. You dare jest. She was offended. I shall have you know that my age is far greater than even yours. Do you even know my age? Flame stammered upon being asked this. You've been defeated, my fool of a friend. She again continued twiddling with the sides of her hair. I shall have you know that I possess many grown-up attributes. She snatched her hair back from Belette. As annoyed as she was, the professor's playful nature made it hard to seek vengeance. I, for one, have already told you of my ancient art of haggling. I have achieved far lower prices than most merchants would have liked to admit to selling. You may have mentioned that one to me before, and I'll admit that it's not a skill I possess myself, but that doesn't account for how much I want to keep you for myself. My brother would certainly not approve of such actions. I'll fight him to the death, then. Hands off my brother. Somehow, the two were resisting their formidable attacks towards one another. Eventually, Flame had completely forgotten how Belette had upset her, and the two began discussing to each other as if they were the closest of friends. By then, nightfall had finally settled. Belette noticed her friend's eyes beginning to drop. Prodding Flame back from her slumber, she motioned for her to stand back up. Want me to carry you back to your bro's office? I am capable of carrying myself. She had sounded far too sleepy to fully make her way back. Belette stood up too. She knew that with the important assembly in 2 days, she had to conduct herself properly as well. Your brother's gonna be mad if you come at this time by yourself. I'll walk you back. She needed some time to think before giving her full answer, but eventually Flame conceded defeat. I'll approve of your offer. And I'll treasure that approval with care, Belette teased. The two began making their ways back. Thankfully, having visited it before, Belette knew all about where Seath resided. She managed to guide her sleepy friend along, just barely stopping her from crashing onto a door on accident. Once the two were inside the academy halls, she stopped before they could proceed towards Seath's room. Professor Belette Just call me Belette. If you're not a student, then there isn't a need for formalities. Very. She yawned. Very well. Professor Billet. I wanted to ask, but I have heard tall tales that your mission was not of complete satisfaction. Huh, already? I suppose it makes sense if your brother's the Archbishop's advisor and all. She kneeled down to face her friend, wanting to address her properly. Yeah. Turns out even when I hitched an early ride, I couldn't stop a friend of mine from getting upset. My brother has told me of the happenings that ensued. Gosh, that's embarrassing. He thought you to be quite foolish in your quest for satisfaction, but I think I am admiring of your actions. Billet was surprised at this. Your name rings aloud from the Black Eagle Hall room. I have heard even some outside students have been wishing to be taught by you and your brother. I have never seen a teacher go so far to honor a request in all my years being here, and I think it very commendable you did all you could for such a student. Oh, really? She was never satisfied with her work in battle. Not compared to her father, or her brother. Billet had been sure that had she resolved to be more firm with Lonato, she could have prevented the bloodshed that ensued. It means a lot to me for you to say that. Flame gave a hug from there. Returning the sentiment, Billet smiled in satisfaction. Just this once you shall be admiring of my small stature, however I will not let you get away next time. Roger, sleepyhead. It was sudden, but the door in front of them had slid open. Before them was Seath. Looking at the two, perplexed, Billet let go of her hug to Flame. She stood up suddenly, panicked that her superior had seen this sight. The tiny child is yours, she spluttered. I'll be heading off now. Midway before running off, Flame called out, resisting her sleepy daze. Professor Billet, she reached her hand. Tomorrow is your day of brief freedom, so, look for Shamir in the training hall. Aye, Captain. She shouted, jogging away as fast as she awkwardly could manage. Flame smiled at this sight. In entering the room from where Seath was, she asked curiously. Did you manage to finish the work? All has been in order. I believe by tomorrow it should cease just in time for Ria's assembly. She was pleased to hear this. As the two closed the door and made their way towards their own quarters, Flame spoke through her sleep-headed voice. I think, you are being too hard on the new professors, she spoke truthfully. Billet is the kindest individual I have ever met. And her brother is a hardened killer, he answered. I understand where you're coming from, however to have been promoted immediately to professors at the academy by Ria herself has left me vexed. I suppose you're correct. I am happy to see you in good company, regardless. Just do not venture out this late, please. Yes. Brother. She had finally felt herself drifting. Falling into her brother's arms, Seath sighed. Opening the entrance to their quarters, he settled her towards her own bed before leaving. Thinking of Flame's words, he knew they had carried some weight to them. His position as an advisor meant that Seath had to abide by his initial suspicions, however. Up until he was certain that no harm would ever befall those he loved under the twins' influence, could he truly relax himself around them in the process. The very next morning, there was much time for the Black Eagle classroom to reside peacefully amongst themselves. Much like those around her, Billet too had wished to ignore the responsibilities that her work demanded of her. Heeding Flame's words, she had asked around for the person called Shamir. Whoever she was, she certainly must have been important for Flame to suggest. Unfortunately, Flame's advice was incorrect, as she was unable to find the person in the training hall. Looking around her, Billet noticed that every one of the guards and staff for the monastery was on high alert. Would that have included Shamir as well? At every turn, she only found more and more measures being done to properly investigate the entire academy. At one point, she was questioned by two knights over her presence. Dismissing them with annoyance, Billet had forgotten completely about her original journey, and instead wanted to reside in the only empty area of the academy that was not in a guard's reach. Sitting beside the fishing pond, she grumbled, annoyed by all that was happening. The heck's their problem? She muttered. They give us a free day and then proceed to not let us off. Annoying. A fishing rod had been cast beside Billet. Completely caught by surprise, she noticed a knightly dressed woman beside her. She had a darkened hair tone, and alongside her typical black shirt, a dark blue jacket had helped keep her warm. Alongside this, a bow was resting on her waist. She looked nowhere near a knight for Belette to truly suspect her, but she was also incredibly skeptical that she had managed to make it this far whilst carrying a blatant weapon alongside her. Nothing you can do about it. The knights have orders to prepare for the big assembly tomorrow, and we just have to live with it. I guess so. How important are these assemblies anyway? She asked. Depends on the situations. And more importantly, who are you? The woman looked at Belette. Noticing she meant no harm as of yet, she gave away her identity. I suppose you should know that by now. I'm Shamir. I work for the knights. She was still caught off guard by her intrusion. Nodding in difficult acceptance, Belette backed away slightly. Shamir realized she had made her too uncomfortable, so she decided to leave. Before standing up, though, Belette pulled her back slightly. You're the one Flayn told me about. Flayn told you of me? Shamir was caught by surprise. Yeah. She told me to look for a person called Shamir. I've found you. Suppose you have. Standing up alongside her, Belette reached her hand as a sign of greeting. Shamir shook, but made no extra effort to further progress their newfound dynamic. I'm surprised I've never seen you around before. You're new like us. I'm usually in charge of the rear when acting on the church's orders. You won't be seeing me much unless you actively seek me out. What about the clothes? What about my clothes? She replied. Do they make you think I'm a suspect of something? No, no. Belette backed away. I meant they're not very, knightly. Striking a valiant pose, Belette made a mocking tone towards the knights. They usually have pish-posh armor, and big swords with them. You from around here? That's a surprisingly astute observation. She smiled, seeing that Belette had some wit in her. But no. I hail from Dada. Dada? Belette asked. We're neighbors of Brigid. We tend to keep to ourselves, but certain circumstances led me to owe a debt to Rhea and her cronies. If you're calling them her cronies, I take it you're not overly attached to them, huh? Belette inquired, but Shamir shrugged her off. Don't get the wrong idea. I just owe them, and I'll pay them back eventually. Oh, right. Somehow, Belette got the feeling that Shamir could get along very well with her brother. She was unsure of what to do next, so she chose to walk beside her. Surely, Flayn had her reasons for wanting the two to meet. You didn't fish much, Belette pointed out. I had my suspicions. It took a minute for Belette to realize Shamir was pointing at her when saying this, to which she gave a bluntly disappointed face. You're in the clear for now. Okay, ignoring that fact you just accused me of something I don't think I did, why is it that everyone's in a panic right now? You're going to find out tomorrow, but you should have known earlier, given your position. Hey, I had my own matters to attend to. Byleth surely knew of the current situation, but given what had happened, Belette did not find time to check with him before on what was going on. Okay, let's end it here, then. Shamir sighed. Who was it that wanted me to see you again? Oh right. Lowering her hands, Belette very dramatically described Flayn. A little green-haired girl of this height, Flayn. Oh, I see, then. Is this about the mission you had with Catherine? You got all that just by me describing Flayn. You must be good at what you do. Somehow Belette had made the right move on Shamir, as she lowered her guard when being told this. Wait, Flayn wanted me to see you because of Catherine. She's my partner in combat. She has a bad habit of leaning too heavily on her loyalty to Rhea, so based on conjecture, I'd say Flayn wanted me to tell you not to beat yourself too hard on that mission. If anything, Catherine might have some regret from that day. Notice any change in habit after your battle alongside her? Well, she was oddly understanding after Lonato left. Then that means I was spot on. Shamir finally confirmed Belette's harmless nature from her interaction with her. 2 pieces of advice for you regarding the coming month: try to talk to Catherine if you can when you get the chance, and be on the lookout from tomorrow. The staff especially will have a lot on their plates. As she was walking off, Belette felt surprised at her sudden exit. She shouted from across the pathway to say her farewells. "Thanks for the chat." "Likewise." A hand propped up to give a sign of farewell as she left. After this, Belette began making her way back to her dorm room. Flame must have noticed her being hung up on the events prior, and so she resolved to have Shamir calm her nerves. Oddly enough, it worked. She felt like she would betray Flame's trust if she were to continue feeling tied down to her guilt, so instead, Belette wanted to forget what happened with Lonato. Such a task was of course not completely possible. Her negative feelings towards the incident would always stay, but at the very least, she knew she had to move on so as not to inconvenience those around her. Feeling mostly satisfied with the time she spent today, she wondered what tomorrow would bring. Something was wrong. The knights were far too on guard, and neither had the staff been at ease lately. To top it off, an assembly of this kind was completely new. Even someone as clueless as Belette could tell that a change was beginning. It was better she settled her business now, for tomorrow had a new set of challenges for her. In the coming month, she and the rest of the Black Eagles would be tested. Their most dire fight yet was about to begin. One way or another, sacrifices would be made, and suspicions would arise. The assassination on Archbishop Ria was supposedly set to begin soon, and it would be up to the entire monastery and those in the officers' academy to protect the one leading them towards their futures. Chapter 38, The Day of the Assembly. It was the very day of the assembly now. Everyone had now gotten their day of rest, and at the early sign of daybreak, the students were expected to meet one another through their classrooms. As for the staff and other special guests, they were to help with setting up the main entrance of the academy to ensure the event went smoothly. As Flame was not yet a student, she was amongst these special guests. She had not minded this duty. For years now, she watched as students came and went about the academy, graduating and then finding new lives for themselves. She befriended as many of the students as her brother allowed her, but ultimately, she knew she would never be amongst them. According to her brother, it was not her place to do so. For now she complied, but Flame would always meander with her thoughts on occasion about an alternate life spent within education. As she and Seath walked together to ensure the Archbishop's assembly went smoothly, Flame once more looked at her brother. His usual serious face was plastered over it. Thinking back, it had been years since Seath was at ease. It was this reason Flame could hold on to her respect for him. As much as she disliked his dutiful surveillance of her actions, Flame had to struggle with the idea that he did this all out of love. That is what she wanted to tell herself, even if her annoyance at his imposed boundaries broke her patience to no end. "Brother, what will this month entail if all of this is transpiring now?" Looking towards her, he admitted his defeat. "I don't know." By now, the two had been passing by the main classrooms outside. From their gazes, they could see the likes of the twins, Hanneman and Manuela, preparing their classrooms before the students came in. "Whatever happens, I expect that everyone can hold their own in this time of unease. The professors included should do so, seeing as they are a centerpiece to this operation. Do you think that the twins will be able to manage?" He was caught off guard by this question, but still readied his answer. "I can already tell that our professors, Hanneman and Manuela, are struggling with the preparations for this month. I'm going to try to limit our new members' workload to compensate for their fresh start, but I know that it will be a hard month for us all." "So it will." Flame thought back to the night that Belette had helped walk her home. If she was to be teaching at the academy forever, then it made Flame happy that she would have a friend for once who did not leave a year after. Maybe it was even possible for her to converse with her brother when she got the chance. She had seen him on occasion, but his aura had given off the allure that maybe he was a difficult one to converse with. "I have asked you this before, but would you permit me to ask you to go into detail on your opinions regarding the twins?" Once again caught off guard, Seath took some time to stare at his sister. Her clear expression of intent made him realize she was more serious of his views than curious, and so he answered as honestly as he could. "The brother is smart, knowledgeable, and is the reason we have suffered very minor injuries in the Black Eagle's monthly missions, whilst the sister cares for everyone but herself, making her the one most important to worry for. They compensate for each other's strengths, but it is when they act alone that their weaknesses are laid bare. Do you think that there is such a thing as being too caring?" Flane asked, thinking of his evaluation of Billet. Every month, the professors are tasked with writing a report on what had transpired during their missions, alongside any notable interactions with students and their concerns. Me and Ria agreed that both of the twins should be writing their own reports, and whilst Professor Biletta's reports are far more colloquial than most, it's clear to see she treats her job with care. It was reassuring at first, but there was a pattern that I've noticed. Seath tried his best to remember his assessment of the reports before speaking. As important as his task of assessing precarious situations was, he also was not a fan of being complacent upon viewing something. She gives off the impression that she will do anything to help those she trusts. That alone does not mix well with the fact that she easily trusts those she meets. Given her actions last month, she took her own initiative and requested her leave before her class. I assume this won't be the first time she does such a thing, but I worry she will only get herself hurt more if she continues. Hurt? My goodness. Flane reacted, worryingly. We must ensure such a thing must not happen. Not to one such as her. I will do my best. But brother, tugging at her brother's collar, she remembered something of importance. Did you not say you disliked the twins? I, frankly, think they would be better off surveying and guarding a coffin during this month's situation. Seeth's sister was unamused by this statement. But even I can see the value that their skills offer. With time, I only hope I can trust them more, but you must understand that my job does not permit me to be easily trusting of those I meet. She was satisfied with his honesty regarding the two. After a while of silence, Flane ended the discussion on a lighter note. Thank you for your honesty. It was my pleasure to be talking about it with you. Seeth added. Just as planned, the students of the Black Eagle classroom had slowly begun entering their own meeting quarters. Whilst at first it was only Edelgard, more members had slowly arisen. To no one's surprise, Linhard was amongst the last to join them. Could you not stand to be earlier, given the situation? Hubert said, annoyed. So what if I had a bit of a lie down? We haven't even had a good rest since our mission started. A few students had secretly nodded their heads in agreement to this. Hey, Professor. Casper pointed towards Byleth. Those certification exams we took a while ago, have they been marked yet? They were looked over by me and sister, however Seeth requested more time to confirm their accuracy. It sucks, though, Billet added. We were pretty thorough ourselves with them. I was, Byleth corrected, slightly bemused. All you could offer towards those examination papers were illustrations of smiles and bandages depending on the answers. Those tests were written too plain as is. What's a world without illustrations? Orderly, Byleth shot back, bluntly. Some of the students chuckled at this interaction. The last week or so of education without Biletta's presence meant that their classes were more informative than entertaining. Whilst some liked this method of productivity, not all the students could put up with Byleth's teaching for long. That was not to say he was bad at teaching, but he often failed to understand that different students required different methods. An explanation on the Axe Prowess module given to Edelgard would work wonders, however he sometimes failed to dumb down this information for those still finding difficulty in the subject, such as Dorothea or Linhard. In having Billet around, she would often be stumped herself, however in understanding her brother's explanation after asking, she was often seen as a translator for students who were not fully accommodated by the learning process. It was because of this that she was in charge of tutoring, whilst Byleth helped with fully ensuring that the correct information was taught to everyone. They were a duo, and the class realized from their last month that separating the two brought out their weaknesses towards. Ignoring sister's vexing tendencies aside, your examination results shall hopefully all be given next week at the earliest, Byleth informed. Retakes can happen as soon as the next week prior, however I have been informed that there is to be a potentially halted schedule following today's assembly. Just what exactly does the assembly entail? Edelgard questioned, to which Byleth kept his mouth shut. I have been told to keep privy to that information. I see. To this, Edelgard put her hand on her chin in thought. The class was not fully at ease following the information given, but most of the students knew they had to live with such a scenario. In walking around the class, Billet could hear whispers around her. Hey, Bern, Dorothea prodded her friend. Mind if you lend an ear for a bit? Sure. Bernadetta answered back, awkwardly. Sorry about the silent treatment after those exams. I'm just really worried, is all. There's just a lot on my mind as of late. Bernadetta had not been used to conversing with many people yet, but after a bit of prolonged time to fully think of her response, she hesitantly replied. I guess I get the whole plate being full with stuff to do thing, she said, to which her friend exchanged a look of confusion. For what it's worth, Dorothea, I really admire that you never went too much into me and my father's circumstances after the day we became friends. Just like you, I'm not in any position to berate you on your own circumstances, but I'm sure you'll manage. Besides, I'm always in my room, anyway. Maybe I can learn some sorcery and we could study together. Dorothea recalled that Bernadetta had wanted to speak with her before, during the day of their exams. She felt guilty knowing that she had this message to say before. Whilst not entirely able to relieve her friend of her worries, she smiled. Thanks, Bern. I'd love to. Belette softened her face upon hearing this interaction. Peering across the two, she faced Dorothea. Don't forget I'm also down to help as well. I spent our tutoring time teaching you more faith than reason magic, admittedly, so I'll take the blame, too, for this one. Oh, thanks, Professor. She stammered, surprised by Belletta's third-party invasion into her conversation. You'll become the dancer class in battle that you want to be. I know you will. That white heron cup will arrive, and we'll ace it. If not, then I'm sure a gramarye course can match your style as well. You really think I'm capable of winning the white heron cup? Of course, she nodded. You told me you wished for it at Edelgard's birthday party a while ago, so I'm definitely willing to see you try. She lit up from hearing this. Happy that all of her students were perked up and ready for their exam results, Belette returned to her brother. Upon asking if it was time, Byleth looked up towards their classroom clock. Soon they would have to go for the big announcement. Just then, the great bell of the academy tolled. The class stopped everything in a dizzying halt. The bell tolled once, and twice, then thrice. As it kept going, Byleth called for the Black Eagles to move out. They walked in unison towards the front of the academy fields. As they tilted their heads around them to examine the area, they saw the other classes joining alongside them. Around them all were guards following after them, with horns in their hands. This was where the twins first saw Rhea, perched upon her balcony, looking at them from afar. This very sight was being replicated once again. On this day, Rhea was looking across the entirety of the academy's student body with Seath and Flame standing behind her. It was still early in the morning. The shaded dark clouded hung low, making the time less than ideal for an assembly. Somehow, though, this was still an unsettling sight. Hey, princess! A voice called out to Edelgard. Turning around, she saw Claude, the leader of the Golden Deers. I take it you've already pieced together what this assembly might be about. I'm sure you have, too. The two of them looked at Rhea from far below. We're not here for any other school assembly. This all links back to the events from yesterday and maybe even from before then, Claude mumbled aloud. I can already tell, what comes after this moment won't be pretty. Just then, Professor Hanneman had emerged. He called for Claude, annoyed at his antics of escapism. Walking back, Claude shrugged at his loss. He waved his hand back at Edelgard, wanting to keep his attention on her. I'm bitter towards our defeat at the mock battle, he said, with confusing sarcasm. Survive a little more for a bit till we get towards a rematch. I'll be waiting, princess. Oddly enough, his jesting tone only made Edelgard smirk in response. She nodded, letting out some air from her lips in determination. Once I catch up to you, I only hope you can keep up. The two exchanged grins before finally leaving one another. Returning to her observation of the situation, Edelgard noted that not one of the students had made themselves silent. It was either from dread, boredom, or curiosity. They were all ready to converse, and so they did. Whatever mood a student chose to take at this moment was soon to be halted, but Edelgard had noticed Rhea silently watching over everyone. She too stared directly at her. It was at this moment that the Archbishop had noticed Edelgard's central gaze. She only smiled back in return, but was immediately taken aback when she realized all of the house leaders were doing this. This was a new reaction the house leaders shared towards the assembly's mood, and it was anticipation. She realized now was finally the time to quell these murmurs below her. Raising her dominant hand upwards into the air, all of the guards below had noticed it was their time to gather the students' attention. All in unison, a loud trumpeting sound could be heard. Each guard had played a tune, imitating the titular notes that would spring to life from the bells of the academy clock tower. As the song ended, all the students stopped what they had been doing. Each and every one of them were now looking towards Rhea. The silence filled the air for a prolonged period now, but not one soul from below dared to break it. Watching away from the student crowd, the twins stood beside one another, in anticipation of what was to come soon. Every year, the staff and students alike take their pride and joys into crafting the perfect festival, celebrating the goddess rite of rebirth during this coming month. During the month of the blue sea moon, the very same blue sea star crosses over, marking a time when we all hope to one day witness the rebirth of the goddess herself once more. The church takes great pride in such an outing, and even more so does the academy in letting students free themselves from their last 2 months of worry. I would love, more than anything, to give this year that very same attention, but I cannot afford such actions. Not right now. Nobody was sure on how to react towards this information. For now, as the Archbishop paused, not one soul could truly process what was happening. Now, more than ever, somebody out in this gray-filled world is out for my very own head, and they have already made their intent on assassination known. On a mission carried out by the Black Eagles, a peculiar letter was found, detailing the method they would use to carry out this cardinal sin. The day of this assassination is the very day of the festival, alongside the time that everyone within and around Garak Mok Monastery comes to visit our sacred abode. The Rite of Rebirth festival is not just a time for us, but for everyone in Fodlan. What the authors of this letter intend to do, is for it to be ruined for the masses, and for my own life to be threatened alongside theirs. I am asking for the student body's assistance. Towards the build-up of the eventual festival at the end of this month, I want everyone stationed around the monastery. You will all be expected to take up a post and carry out arms if the time arrives for it. Ensure no one, guests or the usual populace, suffers the potential onslaughts that my supposed assassination would bring. Before I, put yourselves of importance first. Guard this academy you all worked and studied for, and ensure you can let this month's festival pass without error. Then, and only then, can I be at peace. Once we find the chance to punish these foul sinners, will I thank you all for the dedication you have shown thus far. Do not fail, and do not worry, for this month will be a success, regardless of what these evildoers propose. I am trusting you all to protect yourselves, and to protect my very own life alongside it. Once they had all realized that Rhea's great speech had concluded, everyone finally slowly began piling up whispers besides one another. Barely any of the students were comforted by this speech, but that was not at all the fault of Rhea's delivery herself. It was the very prospect that the central figure of the church, and perhaps even Fodlan itself, was being threatened. As they watched the students worry, the professors all silently waited for the storm to pass. All except one of the teachers was expecting this result. As Byleth turned to his sister, only a worried silence could cross her. It was another mission to ensure a death would not transpire. Just like the missions before it, the stakes were rising, and so too was the difficulty for the trials ahead. Elsewhere, the house leaders all looked curiously at their peers. As Edelgard shifted her head towards her friends, she saw the reactions she would have usually expected. Hubert, amused; Dorothea, concerned; Bernadetta, panicked; Caspar, Ferdinand and Petra, determined, and finally there was Linhard, who was trying his hardest not to sleep through the speech. His reaction was what had annoyed Edelgard the most. Nudging his shoulder, she asked him with a worried concern over her voice about what had transpired. "Did you even listen to anything Rhea said?" "Of course I did," Linhard yawned. "But she seems too naive if you ask me." At this, the attention of the rest of the class was caught. Think this through. Why slip such a letter of importance into Lonato's pockets, when it was clear from the get-go that his rebellion would be defamed by the might of the large central church? This seems far too foolish if you were to ask me. I take it you had the thought I did, then? Edelgard asked. Yes. For once, me and you can find some common ground on this fact. It is very likely that those assassins coming towards Rhea have no actual intentions to kill her, but to do whatever other business they value from within the walls of the monastery. The class was thoroughly impressed by this proposal. Barely able to contain his excitement at this twist, Casper slapped the back of his good friend with a grin of absolute certainty on his face. The blue-spiked boy was hard to stop, as he jumped forward, running across the crowd ahead of him, and screaming at the archbishop above. Yo, Rhea! His voice boomed. Every student, knight, and faculty member stopped their prior engagement all to face the Black Eagle classroom. Caspi, Dorothea whispered, annoyed. What the heck are you doing? Make them stop looking at us. Bernadetta screamed to herself. Only one person knew what he was up to. Linhard knew that as much as he wanted to stop his friend, the two were far too close to properly try anything that would not work. He simply sighed, preparing himself for the hassle that would come. From afar, the twins could feel those who disapproved of their teaching glaring at them. Even someone as oblivious as Billette could feel their piercing gazes. As Byleth prodded her to ignore it, a voice from behind called them. You kids have it rough. It was Geralt. Let's just hope your little one has his mind set straight. Father. Billette beamed. I will be sure to give a strict scolding later, Byleth admonished. Let it slide for now, he said, curiously. Plenty worse the boy can do. We just need to see what's on his mind so much that he gets the archbishop's attention. Both brother and sister acknowledged their father's words, to which they could simply look onward to see Casper pointing his finger high above Rhea. My friend's got an idea that's gonna knock your socks off. At this, he pushed Linhard forward. Go for it, Linhard. He hated this scenario the most of all. Forget embarrassing his class, Linhard was the most ashamed. There was nothing he could do about it, though. Unlike those around him, Linhard was the first to accept this fact. Giving a steady yawn, he gave an annoyed flick of the finger to his friend's forehead, to which he then faced Rhea. I'm sure you've definitely realized this, too. I'd have called you unfit as a leader if the very first thing you did when finding out enemies were after you, was assign us to protect everyone besides your own hide, but I digress. As he finally woke himself up, Linhard found himself rather enjoying explaining his findings. The enemy is after not you, but something from this monastery. The letter was a ruse, and so was your initial speech towards us. The news of your assassination is just to keep us all on edge to better ensure victory. The other classes started whispering immediately upon hearing this. From the Blue Lions, members such as Ash and Annette could only be impressed at this finding. As studious as she was, Annette was heavily impressed by this realization. As for the Golden Deers, Claude found himself being prodded by Lysithea and Hilda. I take it you figured this out already, huh? He's right on the mark, I'd say. Claude winked, slyly. That said, if I wasn't the only one to figure this out, then I'd say it's even more likely this is a possibility. We're gonna have our work cut out for us if we don't even know the enemy's motives. The Black Eagles found less pressure upon them. As Edelgard stopped her scolding towards Casper, she walked towards Linhard, standing beside him. I have to admire the resolve it takes to defy the Archbishop outright. You're either incredibly daft, or strongly willed. I'm neither, Linhard corrected. I simply know what I'm talking about. It's your very intellect that I admire about you, you know. I just wish you used it more often. As more of the people below continued conversing, Flane and Seath looked towards Rhea. She had a moment of silence fall over her due to astonishment. It was not every day that members of the student body screamed for her attention. Giving a smile, she held her hand high in the air, to which everyone noticed and silenced themselves. You are correct. As she said this, more whispers began to arise, but her continued speech silenced this. To the students who shouted and prodded me below, I ask for your names. Casper smirked at this. The name's Casper, son of Count Bergles, the Minister of Military Affairs. He pointed towards his friend proudly. This here's Linhard, son of Count Hevering, the Minister of Civil Affairs. Finally, he nudged Edelgard to speak up. And our class is dash. The Black Eagles. Edelgard finished. Admittedly, she felt a thrill from doing this, and when motioned to do so by Casper, she gave a half 5 out of exhilaration. Archbishop Rhea, we've heard everything you have to say. Is there anything else you want of us? Seath from above whispered towards Rhea. They've turned the tides of authority against us. We should keep an eye on them, Rhea. They're a unique bunch. I can tell, yes. Rhea nodded. Addressing them again, she spoke. I will remember your names for the coming future. In a moment of uniqueness, her voice boomed loudly. All of you standing here today must steel yourselves. We do not know when the enemy would strike, but only that they will do so during these tender hours. Make haste in preparations, and don't neglect your studies. Raising her hand up, she began to take her leave. You are all dismissed. As the student body began to leave, whispers were heard throughout. The twins, unknowingly, began making their leave as well, however they had been stopped by Manuela and Hanneman. You're both still new to this, dears, but usually the professors need to stay back during open assemblies to convene with Rhea. Indeed, Hanneman added. And I am sure she has much to say after your class daring display today. The twins both exchanged looks of worry. Of the things their father had warned them not to do, it was to be careful of Rhea. They were sure she must have been upset in some way or another. As they walked along towards the usual hall, Billette whispered to her brother. Can I just keep quiet as usual and let you do the talking? If it suits you best, then I shall let it be. The door was opened, and the twins, Manuela and Hanneman, lined up. It took only a few seconds before the door opened again. Turning back, they saw Gerald line himself alongside the group, as they all faced Rhea. As usual, Seath was behind the Archbishop, this time with Flane alongside him. I must thank you all for your patience and understanding during these trying times. The Archbishop began her usual talk. I hope you all managed to get some rest during yesterday's break. Among the group, Manuela and Billette wanted to argue back, but they kept silent for their own sakes. I want you all to continue with your teachings. Be sure to encourage the young minds and boost morale. They are your own small army, in a way. And what about those that don't teach? Geralt interrupted, unamused. I was told to come visit you here as well by one of the knights. Ah, yes. Facing him, Rhea showed a serious face. This was one she had only done once before, but even so, it startled everyone in the room. You will be in charge of the knightly forces. Command them as you see fit, and ensure this month is a success. Captain of the Knights of Sirios again, huh? He put his head down in disbelief. Can't say no to you, I suppose. Good. I am glad you understand. Of all the times the twins had seen their father, they noted he was never one to back down and obey those he disliked. As Byleth thought more of these behaviors, he wondered if there was something regarding the two that had fixed his behavior somehow to Rhea in this way. All of you are dismissed. Billette smiled when hearing Rhea say this. But I still wish to speak to our new professors. At this, her face quickly shifted to one of irritation. Manuela and Hanneman took their leave, but before Gerald could walk away, he had turned his head away from Rhea, making sure only his children were able to hear him. Careful around her. Don't know how many times I can say this, but Rhea's another person entirely you should worry about. As he left, the twins could only wonder what he had meant. They both returned to face Rhea, in worry she would disapprove of their prior behavior. As they remained silent out of respect, Rhea's expression had reverted back to its usual tender smile. Your class showed quite compelling behavior. They were surprised by this response. Whilst usually their actions would have earned my grief, I have always been curious towards speaking on more closer grounds with the students. I was glad when that boy called out to me. It seems you are nurturing a curious bunch. Yes. Byleth was unsure how to answer, to which he could see his sister's sly grin. I will be sure to scold them, nevertheless. You can do as you see fit with your class. That is the beauty of nurturing young minds, after all, she commended. What is your take on the boy who dared oppose me? By that I mean, Linhard. She turned her head to Billette. Starting from you. Her brother was unable to help her. Billette had been taught by a book once in these situations that complete honesty was always a good quality. Rather than usually readying herself, she began for her usual blatant ramblings. He's got a lot of sleep to catch up on. I'm kinda jealous that he can fall asleep so easily, though. Turning back to her brother to see if she had made a good impression, she could only sense disappointment from him. From the back, a small sound of laughter from Flame could be heard. Ria noted what Billette had to say, but did not feel the need to comment on it any further. Somehow, she had given a predictable answer for her standards. Instead focusing on Byleth, she once more asked the same question. If only his focuses were more in line, I believe his untapped potential would make much use for a traditional force. Unfortunately, with such gifted skill, he solely uses it for his own purposes, and as such, I feel he has much potential. This was an answer Ria seemed to favor more. She thought back to him once more. Linhard von Hevering, the boy who lazily shrugged me off, whilst proclaiming my actions to be foolish in nature. I will remember him, she said. Do what you must to aid his skills for this month. I want to see his abilities used to help lift the weight off of everyone's shoulders. Are you suggesting I prioritize him? Byleth pondered aloud. Yes, and do so swiftly. Nodding his head, Ria was pleased with all she had accomplished. You may withdraw from my presence for now. Billette breathed a sigh of relief. As they both nodded their heads out of respect, they left the hall. The door closed, leaving only Ria and her usual attendees within the hall. That boy, she thought aloud. I wonder just how methodically he plans to utilize this month, and I too wonder how they manage this month's procedures. This had concluded the important event of the school assembly. From this point on, only time could tell what the enemy was planning. Chapter 39, Ascending Their Level. Somehow, she had managed to happen herself atop the guarding walls of the monastery. She giggled to herself uncontrollably, playing with her dagger with little worry. The view from up above was spectacular. It was a shame that students were never allowed here, as the church placed such great trust in them already. Kronia found it embarrassingly easy for her to sneak through. The sun was just now starting to rise, but before she could enjoy it, another figure of sinister workings had arrived. Don't be so reckless as to come near the church. You could very well be killed if they saw you. It was the Flame Emperor. Kronia gagged upon seeing him. I'm sure you just don't want me touching your territory, so I get that whole primal instinct, but I like doing whatever I want, so you're out of luck. That impudence might cost you one day. Somehow, the Emperor knew that his attempts to move over Kronia would be for naught. Changing the subject around, he hoped to at least uncover at least a fraction of her dubious workings. What brought you here to begin with? A lot, really. I hear Old Death Knight's been paid to help out with the invading group's little ploy. Always knew he was a solo man we could count on with some coin, but I didn't expect him to work on another client immediately. He does whatever he can to satiate his bloodlust, the Emperor acknowledged. I should be careful, though. Only now are rumors beginning to take place about him at the academy. Fortunately, everyone's so busy with that rite of rebirth crap to really say anything more. Honestly, Flamey, it gets old little Kronia thinking her tongue caressed the safe side of her knife. That old captain I fought before. I want some revenge from that time in Inver. Killing someone would only arouse suspension dash. I know, but that Geralt guy was just promoted to captain is all. Isn't that wonderful? In what sense? The Flame Emperor asked out of concern. Whenever Kronia had a reason for something, it was never for the reasons one would expect of her. The more important the enemy, then the more people get upset over their passing or danger. It gets me riled up. Now, a cackle had arisen from her. As she tried to contain her sinister smile, she leaned in closer to the Flame Emperor. Rest assured, Flamey, I won't kill him. I'm just going to show him what messing with me can really do. Somehow, this reasoning did not surprise him. Sighing, he simply walked away. Kronia was admittedly confused by this reaction, but she laughed all the same. I'll say it again, don't kill him. If the Knights of Ceros become hot on our trail, then we have no true way to compensate for the damages you would cause. Yeah. You just enjoy yourself at the academy, all right. I'll deal with what I need to in the meantime. The Emperor had left from sight now. Kronia shrugged and sat back down, striking through the open wind with her trusty knife. She counted to herself, imagining the carnage she would bring with such actions. Thrilling. She giggled manically. Rite of rebirth, huh? This is the most excited I've been for a festival. As the morning arose, so too had classes began again. So far, the students were still finding it in their power to wake themselves up from such an early beginning. They had been off of school for a few days, so having to readjust towards these changes was something completely new. Yet another day Professor Billet cannot make it, I see, Hubert inquired, to which Byleth refuted his conclusion. Sister is on her way to retrieve your results from the tests last month. At this, everyone had immediately perked their moods up. It had been far too long, and some students even worried they were never going to retrieve their results. As they all peered curiously at the door, whispered murmurs could be heard. I must say, this feels incredibly long overdue, Edelgard said with some excitement exuding her voice. You tell em. Caspar boomed. Just for everyone to know, as the Princess of Adrestia, I won't tolerate any failures from any of us today. Work hard after this and make do your prior errors don't happen next time. Upon saying this, she looked ominously towards Linhard. That includes everyone. Forget that thought. Ferdinand laughed triumphantly. Would you be willing to compare our results, Edelgard? We must see who is truly the most studious of them all. I would like to be sharing the results of the exam with you as well, Petra smiled. We can be learning from each other. Besides everyone else in the class, there was Bernadetta and Dorothea quietly observing with intent. Bernadetta had been one of the few students to have been forced to attend the academy, and as such, she had never brought too much interest in her passing of the exams. Sure, she had wanted to succeed from the challenges imposed on her, but it would not have brought her tumbling in spirit if she had failed by a small margin. She was more concerned for Dorothea, her best friend. I'll help you no matter what. The same friend looked at her with some concern on her face. I know from coming here that everyone has their own challenges. I'm sure you'll get through them. Yeah, Dorothea acknowledged, but kept her negative thoughts to herself. I never thought you to be the forward type, you know. You're really changing. I'm gonna get left in the dust before long at this rate. Then I'll have to drag you right out of there. Getting out her notebook for studies, Dorothea was surprised to see her friend ripping a page from it. As she scribbled on it, she looked over at her friend with concerned intent. Finally, she brought up a surprisingly detailed image of a stuffed bear, arms wide out in cheer, with certain recognizable ruffled hair from their head. Bernie Bear believes in you. This made Dorothea laugh. Bernadetta looked at her with confusion, but after containing herself, she ruffled her friend's signature messy hair. I didn't know you were good at drawing. That's cute. Give me a sec. Bernadetta realized. Drawing once more, she now illustrated another bear, this time with Dorothea's signature cap. The added bear was now in a happy position, looking admirably at the supposed Bernie Bear. It worked. I needed to update the events as they transpired. You're too sweet. She gently took the illustration from her friend to look at it. Can I? I want to keep this. May I? I've never really given my drawings for someone to keep before, but, yeah. Keep it. Her friend smiled with gratitude, staring at the drawing with pleasure. If I'm honest, I thought I'd dread my time in the officers' academy. Still, even if I can't get along with a lot of the class, I think you and the professors have been the reason for me not wanting to go back home yet, so I'm grateful. I'm grateful I met you, as well. Dorothea noticed that nobody else in the class could hear them. They were all too caught up being excited at the prospect of their exam results. I came into the academy through any means possible, and as an orphan, it was my way to make something out of myself. This was the first time she was opening up to someone. Bernadetta stammered from hearing this, but she controlled herself to stay calm. If I'm going to be honest, I'm trying my best to find someone to marry me. I wanted to secure my own future, so I came here for my own selfish reasons, but I'm glad that I made some great friends along the way. At least for as long as it takes me to find my perfect somebody, I'm ever so grateful to have you by my side. Ditto. She agreed. Don't worry, by the way. I'm always in my room all the time, so that secret's safe with me. I know. She winked. That's why I told you. Smiling at one another, Dorothea stood up, motioning for her friend to follow suit. As they did, she joined up with Edelgard. She was startled when even Bernadetta had come to the group, but nevertheless, Edelgard gave a pleased expression. We won't fail you, Edie, Dorothea cheered. You can count on the prime songstress of my old opera company to bring good results. And, I guess my title is, Lady of Varley Territory, Bernadetta said, shyly. Never mind. That's too much responsibility for me. Just know Bernie Bear's gonna do her best to bring home gold, Your Highness. No need for formalities, Edelgard replied. Just saying my name is fine enough, Bernadetta. Thanks, Edelgard. His Majesty's supreme daughter. We might need some practice on your phrasing another day, Edelgard replied, slightly annoyed, but understanding. For now, all we can do is wait for Professor Belletta's arrival. They all agreed. As all of this noise was taking place, Byleth did not think it right to calm the students. He had noticed in his time away from Billette that they did not always respond well to commands or orders. Just this once, he wanted to experiment with how they would behave without his guidance. Looking at it from a tactical standpoint, this information would then be able to help him in future battles. I can sense the girl approaching. Suthies arose, only materializing for the eyes of the twins. Unfortunately, that noisy ruckus over there won't be able to hear her footsteps in time. I am sure they will find all the more joy from her arrival, then. Byleth agreed. The young girl's eyes glimmered in jest. Seeing you be so understanding of human emotions is such a rare occasion. Why, it only feels like yesterday that you ignored a student looking for your help. Perish the memory, Byleth replied, bluntly. Yes. Whatever the case, your sister was able to solve Ash's queries almost single-handedly. I'm sure she can pull through with bringing us some documents. Yes, I think so, too, Byleth agreed. She may be largely unaware of the larger happenings around her, but that does not mean sister is completely incompetent. I'll be sure to let her know you said that, Suthies said, bemused. For my safety and your own, I would advise you not to. It was then that a female figure had come tumbling through the door of the Black Eagles. Slamming the documents of learning down on the front table with pride, she ignored the slight feeling of pain she had from tripping over in the class. Get ready, losers. Billette joked, motioning her hands swiftly in the air out of excitement. We're about to see those test results, longly awaited ones, at that, but they're test results all the same. Damn right they are. Casper cheered, to which the rest of the class, excluding Linhard, had cheered from being riled up. Ready or not, here they come. Their teacher continued, finding joy out of the positive atmosphere. Sister, should we not check to see if dash? Too late. Suthies replied smugly. Look at her go. The girl can run when it suits her best, it seems. The young girl was right. Beyond them, was the sight of Billette excitedly passing along each paper to each student. She gave passionate and delighted waves of the paper to each student, and upon reaching the sleeping Linhard, she ever so slightly bunked her sleepy student with his results. Thankfully, he was the last one, so the hit on the head did not give too much attention towards his lazy habits, as everyone was already ruffling through their results in a frenzy of curiosity. As she walked back to join her brother and Suthies, she could only smile to herself in glee. Byleth sighed slightly, but he maintained his demeanor regardless. Who passed the exams? He asked. What shall we do for those that failed to keep up with the rest of their group? Nothing much. I'll take care of the ones that stumbled a little with my usual tutoring, if that's okay with you. Byleth nodded his seal of approval at Belletta's idea. Just let me work my magic, then. Hold on. Suthies floated towards Billette, then proceeded to move towards the students in concern. Are you implying that we had failures? At this, Billette had visibly gotten upset from being asked this question. Suthies felt guilty from seeing such a reaction, but her eagerness for answers led her to conclude she had wanted an honest reply over the cost of upsetting one of her vessels. I memorized all of their certifications, Billette said. She would usually be proud of such an accomplishment, but her dedication towards teaching had removed that with sympathy. Bernadetta and Casper got into the fighter class. Edelgard moved one up from there and reached the title of brigand. Hubert became a monk, Petra reached mercenary status after qualifying for Myrmidon, and Ferdinand became a soldier class. I see, Byleth observed. Then that means dash. Dorothea and Linhard failed. At this, both Suthies and Byleth showed a shocked expression. Admittedly, they had seen the worried demeanor of Dorothea before and had expected as such, but to see someone as talented as Linhard stumble was vexing. That, it is unexpected, but I trust in you to help them catch up, if you firmly believe you can, sister. Of course. She replied with a worried expression. Leave it to me. I'll let them know that there's still hope, and a lot of it, at that. Linhard silently stared upon his sheet. This was not right. He knew he did not need to put in the effort to gain an upper hand in the certification exams. Whilst before he did not care as much, he grew slightly concerned at this moment. Edelgard's gonna have my head in the ringer, it seems. He sighed. It shouldn't have been like this. The stuff in the test was elementary. At least, I thought it was. He did not notice behind him that his friend was looking upon the sheet. With a pat on the back, Casper let go of his smile. Chin up, Linhard, he ordered. I think you of all people should know there's always a next time. I suppose so, yes, but that does not mean this isn't vexing as is. I getcha. Getting up from his seat, he suppressed his yawn for once. I suppose from your smile you've already passed. Congratulations. Thanks. I'll fix this up later. It's not as big a priority as it was before, but with the time I could spend looking over other material, I'll need to gradually look this over and cross-reference later. Yeah. An awkward silence had settled besides the two friends. As Casper dwindled his thumbs awkwardly, he noticed Linhard was not at all shaken by this nothingness. You know Edelgard's gonna be after your head, right? Don't remind me, he said, annoyed. Even seeing the sheet herself, and predicting the results beforehand, it still hurt to see such scores on her test. The number was surprisingly lower than expected. It was not that she was close but made a few mishaps, but it was that Dorothea largely underestimated her module. Even with all the studying in the world, she felt frustrated. She wanted to scream and cry. She blamed her lack of education throughout her life. All the nobles around her in the class had some sort of education before. They knew how to take these exams, and they did so out of habit by now. She felt annoyed. Why was she the one being handicapped? Why was it that she had to suffer at the cards that life dealt her with? Why did she need to go through so much effort for such little gain in the end? Bernie Bear believes in you. A soft voice spoke up. Dorothea looked back at her friend, but saw her attention was elsewhere. Looking back down on her table again, she saw her abysmal scoring had been covered and bombarded with the drawings she had asked to keep. Just once, she sobbed a little. She held back her tears, however, instead smiling for her friend. Not all nobles are insufferable, I suppose. She hugged her friend. Thank you for believing in me, even after all this. From beyond the classroom, Ferdinand had heard her remark. He felt sympathetic, and as desperately as he wanted to help his classmate, he knew how much Dorothea had loathed his company. Bernadetta seemed to be a positive influence, so he let her handle it. Still, he wanted to contribute something towards the table. He knew as a noble, he needed to help and assist those under him. At least that was what he believed in. Walking to Billette, he asked her a question. Will you please help the ones upset from this exam? He asked, trying his best to be discreet so as not to attract any attention. You got it. Billette agreed. You know, I've heard you don't get along with a bunch of the class, but you're not half bad. Believe what you will, Professor. I just want to do as any proud member of the nobility would do. You got it. Walking back to his seat, he noticed Edelgard smiling from her result. Completely forgetting his kindness from before, he proceeded to act with his usual competitive nature towards her. At this, he had once again annoyed Edelgard and Hubert. "All right, everyone. I think we should settle down now." Byleth's voice had boomed more than usual. At this, Suthies whispered towards Billet. "What has gotten him in a rut?" "He's a man of order," Billet answered, truthfully. As everyone returned to their seats, Byleth signaled for his sister to hand out more slips of papers to each student. They all took it in stride, reading over each word carefully. Once the students receiving the paper were satisfied, Byleth spoke once more. "Store those certifications in a reputable area. Should they be lost and we as witnesses and professors are unable to confirm your achievements, then a possible retake for these exams are very likely. For the students that failed, Sister has handed in your old exams, alongside comments filled by her to help clarify your understanding. Additionally, as per usual, tutoring charts have been given early to the failed students. Take your time and get ahead whilst you still can at a time that suits you best. Don't take it as an all-or-nothing sign of shame, either." Billet reiterated. "I'd say it's a head start. Just come to me anytime. The tutoring chart is a guideline, if I'm honest. I'll be free to help even on my breaks." "So she says," her brother continued. "Regardless, there are other urgent matters to attend to. Unfortunately, these exams, as much as we want to prioritize them, are an afterthought. Protecting the Archbishop, and more precisely, whatever the enemy is looking elsewhere for, is but our main priority." Speaking of the old Lady Rhea, Billet began leading on to something, to which after gazing at her brother out of desperation, he let her continue. "Everyone but two very special people in this class will be signing their names upon this sheet." Yet again, Billet had whipped about another piece of paper with various graphs scattered upon it. "Call it a non-negotiable contract for you all. Pick a place and guard it with everything you can on the assigned hours this month. Naturally, there are some rules to this," Byleth added. "Should any of you be in danger, you are to assess the situation, calling backup if you think your foe to be too dangerous to handle. As for your studies, those will be done in your own due time. Professor Billet has been one of the few professors who agreed to extra shifts to teach what you have missed, so she will largely be free if you are to see her and want to catch up on those hours you had missed. Don't forget this guy, either. He'll answer your questions even if he isn't legally obligated to," Billet joked, pointing at her brother, to which Suthies chuckled in amusement. "Barring that aside, do you all understand your objectives?" Everyone cheered or nodded in understanding. Before Byleth could continue, however, another hand was raised. It was Edelgard's. "What of the students who you said were not undertaking this task? Who exactly are they?" "Well, your lucky student no one," Billet answered happily. "Congrats. You have some great responsibilities ahead of you, but I suspect you'll make it. Brother recommended you after all." "Oh, he did." Edelgard looked towards Byleth, who despite giving a nod, still had a blank stare. Even remembering all she told him of her past and having him push her forward in special favored priority was enough to embarrass her, but she held on to her trust in him nonetheless. "I thank you. That's where the good fortune ends, though." Billet poked at her brother. "I'm dying to do the honors." "Come on, brother. Lemme it I'm." Byleth sighed. Immediately, the class grew curious. Some who were acquainted with their next seat partner had whispered to one another, but the rest had looked around nervously, wondering what their professors could have meant. Eventually sighing, Byleth went on. "You have my blessing." "Brilliant." Billet beamed, an evil glint escaping her eye. "I'd love more than anything to do a drum roll, but unfortunately I know both student number 2 and brother himself wouldn't appreciate it. Everyone, feast all your eyes towards him, but the one in charge of helping Edelgard with extracurricular investigations this month is none other than Linhard." Everyone had been shocked by this news. Immediately, they all turned their gazes towards the second student himself, to which he could only moan at this announcement. Upon sighing, he had accidentally let another yawn once more escape him. Looking over Edelgard as well, he could see she was not amused either by this revelation. The supposed lazy student and the studious one, huh? Interesting pairing, Hubert surmised. I can only hope this goes well in the end. Great. Linhard moaned. Somehow I dug myself another hole to try to get out of. Chapter 40, Brother and Sister. Flame carried much excitement on this particular day. Whilst she had not typically been someone who was interested in maintaining her usual responsibilities, seeing all of the students readily sign in and promise to guard the various parts of the monastery had excited her to no end. Just once, she had wanted such a big role. The month of the blue sea moon was only beginning, and this meant that it would have given her plenty of time to prepare for such a time. So, she marched along the monastery, with a sheet in hand and a pencil on the other. Of course, she did say hello to anyone whom she recognized, but many of them had been knights she had been accustomed to seeing already. A thought had risen in her mind to say hello to Billette, but she was unexpectedly surprised upon seeing she had taken up her usual tutoring duties in these unstable times. From afar, Flame witnessed the face of Billette slowly trying to instruct two students on the correct and incorrect answers for their supposedly failed exams. Whilst one was meticulously trying to figure it out, the other with ruffled purple hair was acting as mere moral support. Flame felt it rude to attend such a meeting, and so she closed the door properly after opening it, so as not to allow any other nosy individuals to see such a sight. Off she marched once more. This time, she looked curiously at the sights of the knights scurrying. They did this more than usual. It was a shame, because Flame was sure that they would love more than anything for the monastery to not be in the state it was in. It only took one letter to shake it all to its core. Still, she thought it inspirational in some way. Rhea had been able to move everyone along with little error, and she did it, in part, due to her skillful leadership. Of course, her brother also had a hand in such roles, but when he was acting as someone in an advisory position, Seath always thought it best to inspect upon something before acting upon it, unless what he needed to act upon had something to do with Flame, that is. Finally reaching the inner parts of the building for the monastery, she could see from the distance some students passing by to give the library a visit. Curiously, she noticed that the two students who were daring enough to interrupt the assembly just a day ago were both present, alongside Professor Byleth. Flame noted that he looked much like his sister, but at the present time, she was in no position to interrupt and discuss matters with him. So she marched onwards, still with a sheet in hand and pencil in another. A while before she had opened the door, Seath was visiting Rhea's quarters. He had some concerns drifting across his mind, but he knew he would need to set those aside in due time. Rhea's life had to be protected, and so too did the secrets of the monastery need to be pushed within their hidden confines. Walking past her, he handed some slips of papers to the archbishop, furrowing his brows all the same. "It is the list of students that you wanted, alongside which areas they chose to guard the monastery," he explained. "Naturally, I did every location besides the Holy Tomb, as you had instructed, but I gather that even if I myself do not know of the tomb's location, then not many other individuals will." "Precisely," Rhea answered, looking over each document in thorough detail. "I regret having to inspect even those of our student body for suspicious activity, but we cannot make any errors with this operation. Not many were interested in the monastery to begin with. Even if that was the case, they were a small batch of students. Linhard and Claude in particular, yes." Rhea guessed, to which Seath nodded with grief. "Yes, they are an interesting pair. The knights have caught Linhard occasionally wanting to inspect some of the buildings that were out of reach for students, but he has tried to do so all the same. It's interesting, because it clashes with all the reports that we have been told about him. At the very least, I hear the leader of the Golden Deers is more tactful with his approaches into our secrets. Professor Byleth has already stated before that Linhard is an enigma. It only makes me question, though, Rhea, about why you chose to do as you did." When Seath asked this, Rhea gave him a glance of confusion, prompting him to charge ahead with his curiosity. "You gave both students, Edelgard and Linhard, the full authority to avoid any and all duties associated with the rite of rebirth. The only condition was that you wanted them to go off on their own accord to investigate the situation as they wished. If I recall, you even said they were free to do so whether they gave us results or not." "Yes, they amused me in the assembly. Even though she was prompted to do so, their house leader still did challenge me in my ways alongside Linhard. The two were fully confident in their defiance, and I wanted to know more. Seath was curious when hearing this answer, however, he did not expect Rhea to go into further blunter detail. Put simply, I want to know what skills the next Imperial Princess might be made of. We were told by the reports that Linhard had often clashed in ideology with her, so I was interested in seeing how she might command such a capable individual with such little morale. Her explanation was one completely new to Seath. As someone who was meant to be guiding and assisting Rhea, it was worrying he never knew what she was thinking. Admittedly, he was slightly amused by this explanation, but his concern had been aroused as well of how this experiment would turn out. Your very life is being put on trial and you're still doing movements such as this. Oh, please, Seath. You and I both know that my fighting prowess is unmatched. I have not gone old with time, so do not worry on my behalf. He sighed. As you wish. Before he was to leave to continue his work, Rhea had pushed back in response to his questioning. What of you keeping an eye on the Black Eagles? I saw previously you had been carousing their records and reports just last night. What were you hoping to accomplish? Ah, that. He thought back to before the assembly began, about his favor from Flane and the worry on her face when talking to him. Flane expressed an interest towards Professor Billette in her class after kindling a swift friendship with her. I was hoping to see how capable she and her twin had trained their students in preparation for this month. Hearing this response had made Rhea smile. I will say it once again, but you must give more time for Flane when you can, lest you will be out of touch. After this month, I'm hoping to do just that. After saying this, a knock had sounded through the door. Rhea and Seath were alarmed when hearing it, but when motioning for the door to open, Flane had done just that. She entered quite happily, setting the sign-up sheet atop of Rhea's desk. Rhea, I would very much like to help the student body in their guarding duties. Might you allow me this rare opportunity? Her face had brightened up when asking this. Immediately, however, the two elders in the room knew at once why Flane was asking Rhea of all people. She wanted most of all to avoid the permission of her brother. Flane had known he would be the first to decline his request. Unfortunately, she did not realize Seath had been right beside the Archbishop. You shouldn't treat such a distressing time akin to a fine outing. He was stern when speaking to her, startling Flane. It could be you, most of all, that the enemy is after. You should stay beside me for safety. I thought that was what we agreed upon. Yes, but her smile had vanished and been exchanged for worry. Everyone's efforts to ensure that this month could be a success is most inspiring. I want to help. This would be a difficult topic to discuss with the young girl. Seath closed his eyes in regret, trying his hardest to think of words kind enough to sway his sister. Unfortunately, as much as Rhea had wanted to help him, she was but a witness to this scene. He had one method, however it was a risky one, and he hated its usage. You know your mother would not want you being put in such danger. I ask you kindly, please do not put yourself in such a situation. You should not use mother's name in such jest. Unfortunately, he was incorrect in his thinking, as he had now upset Flane. Still, she desperately wanted this opportunity, so after taking some time to retain her composure, she breathed heavily before once again speaking. Brother, could we please use this as an opportunity to see how capable I am? I cannot even go shopping without your beady eye patrolling me. Yes, and you even go so far as to disobey my direct orders not to go outside just to show how valiantly you display your responsibility. Seath had said this out of spite by accident, but he realized it could work all the same. Trust is the very foundation of responsibility, but you have yet to even build on that. That feeling goes both ways, brother. When saying this, even Seath took a moment of silence to think over what he said. Flane realized there was no reasoning to further make him agree with her, and looking over at the silent, but solemn Rhea, she realized this month was far from the right moment to pursue an ongoing feud with Seath. With regret, she took the sign-up sheet back, leaving the pen behind. I'm sorry, brother, but I do not wish to upset you further. I ask we return to this discussion at this month's end. As Flane walked onwards, Seath found it difficult to look at her. You know I am doing all of this to protect you. Please do not treat my acts of caution with hostility. I suppose that caution had earned you the title of an advisor, but sometimes it is not always needed. Before closing the door, she looked up at her brother once more. You know mother would have said the same. The door closed, leaving Seath and Rhea to stay fully silenced. He was visibly upset after Flame had taken her leave. The girl did not so much as shout after her defeat, yet her formal method of arguing had carried some weight as a result. Still, Seath realized he still had his own matters to attend to. Before leaving, however, Rhea stopped him once more. Will you not carry the discussion further with young Flame? When I come back home tonight, she will have already forgiven me. He was dismayed at how heartless these words had made him sound, but it was true. After years of arguments and debates between the two, this was the usual pattern. For now, he could be glad she was so civil about the entire affair. I will not suggest to you on if you are doing the correct thing or not, but if you are doing something in her name, then be sure to let her know, Rhea commented. For example, I'm sure she would be pleased you are looking out for the Black Eagles as you were doing before. Oh, believe me, I would gladly give those twins the easiest job to set aside my worries of their inexperience, he remarked. I can only wonder what you were thinking when promoting them to such a role, but even I know that you will still keep silent about the whole debacle, even with me. You understand correctly, then? Yes. Opening the door once more, he looked back towards Rhea. Stay safe, Rhea. Take an escort with you if you wish to patrol the student grounds. It would make everyone feel far safer if you appear with the company. As you wish, Seath. The door closed, leaving Rhea to her work alone. She wondered to herself how the students would be getting along during these times. More specifically, today was the day the twins were to be announcing the new roles for Edelgard and Linhard. From her initial judgment of Linhard, she was sure he was less than enthusiastic to be helping with this new task. Before that, and even before that time ago, she had been furious at Seath. Unfortunately, it all resulted in the same such story. Flame would have to always admit defeat and revel in her secluded world. She walked away, disappointed. She was far too stubborn, and as a result, she knew that she would bring up the issue another time, but she was not contentious enough as to worry her brother in the dire rite of rebirth mishap that was soon to begin. Annoyed, she did not feel like returning home just yet. For a while, Flame decided to wander the academy halls. Eventually, it dawned on her that she had but one place in the monastery she loved more than anything to visit. As the evening began to settle, she walked across the great bridge connecting the monastery to the great cathedral. As she looked upon the great murals and various statues of the saints that preceded Fogland's current population, she could only be left to think of what had happened during the day. The statues were comforting to her. Looking at their majestic posing and poised expressions, she had noticed they had been dirted over time. She huffed, trying to wipe away any specks that had gathered, but it was a fruitless effort. They were much too tall for her short height, and neither was her strength adequate enough to rid them of the mess. Flame had yet another reason to be upset today. Now that she had noticed them like this, she left once more. Her favorite place had been ruined. It was but one of the few places Seath approved of her visiting, so the frustration was understandable. Venturing outwards, she saw her once again. Just like 2 days prior, the professor was staring at the sunset before the day ended. She had disturbed enough people today. Flame decided to leave her to her usual tendencies. As she walked away, however, Belette had other ideas. She prodded upon her hair, grinning as she noticed her. Yo! She called out. You're not sleepy this time, huh? No, I'm not. She forgot to check her tone. Somehow the passing of time had not hid her disappointment. I simply wanted to walk around. That's so. Belette knew herself not to be completely oblivious. Just like she had noticed with Ash, she knew Flame had worries of her own. Hopefully, they were not as dire. Wanna go fishing? I beg your pardon. She replied, stunned. I am sorry, but brother fears I would get caught in and endangered. It is not an activity I can do so freely. I'll take full responsibility, then, dummy. She prodded her friend's forehead, ducking down to do so. Me and you. This late at night means no one's hogging the pond near the greenhouse, and it's definitely going to be peaceful. Those fishies won't suspect a thing. Why are you offering me this, Professor? Billette had a choice to be completely honest, however she chose only to tell half of the fact. I just remembered you saying you loved fish, is all, and I feel I should pay you back for teaching me about Fodlan back in the library. But you already did so before. I want to do it again. Somehow, this seemed like sound justification coming from Billette for Flane to believe her. And let's drop the professor thing, please. You're not a student, so let's just go by a name-to-name basis. As she walked off, Flane followed her. She had somehow gotten herself trapped in a situation she had never thought to be in, but admittedly she had wanted to go fishing as well. Billette must have recalled Flane's liking for the food, so naturally this must have prompted her to assume Flane liked such an activity. The two continued walking, talking to one another to pass the time. A while back, I had to help someone from the Blue Lions. You already know the story, so I won't go into too much detail, but he was too nervous to tell his whole situation to me. As she was narrating, Billette took off her coat as she did a few times before. I told him that so long as I didn't have my jacket on, I'd be his friend. In my eyes, the second I have this thing holding me down away from me, I'm stripped off of my title as a teacher. Flane listened, now slightly curious. Are you not cold in doing so? It must also be difficult to carry, also. Yeah, well, tough. I can live with that price, Billette remarked. She looked back at Flane, speaking earnestly in the process. Hey, we're friends. Remember that, will you? I'm here to help anytime. Flane could not remember if they had confirmed their friendship before. Even if they once did, it still felt nice for her to say this to her. She felt calmer knowing this. Many were trustworthy in the academy, but not many could always be tasked with maintaining Flane's attention. Thank you, Professor, or should I say, Billette. She paced herself, catching up to her new friend so they could walk alongside one another. I think I may have mentioned so before, but there was a time when I had lost faith in true friendship at the monastery. The knights would treat me as a child, and the students would vanish in just under a year. All I have is my brother and the archbishop, but even so, I desired for a true friendship. She looked up at Billette, much like a child begging for attention. Tell me, would you be leaving me as well? It was a sad state of affairs. When asked this, Billette took a moment to think of her previous life as a mercenary. It was one she admittedly did not care much for. No. I think I'll be staying for as long as you're here. Finally, the two reached the pond. It was almost nightfall, but this did not stop Billette from continuing as she usually would. She borrowed a fishing rod from a stall nearby, cast her bait, and flicked the rod. Her additional step that she did not always do was motioning for Flane to sit beside her. Brother would be willing to go as far as expelling you for such an act of treason such as bringing me with you. Just help me tug at a big one if one pops up. I think that's safe enough, at least. Did you not say my brother was scary, though? It was clear Seath had an influence over the young girl, even if unintentionally. Whilst he was not heinously controlling, to Billette, who always had a life of freedom with her actions, she felt for Flane. I've lived a life doing plenty of scary things. Let's both add suffering to your brother's punishment on that list, then, if we do get caught. Oh. I see. They fell silent for a bit. This time it was not completely out of awkwardness. The two simply kept to themselves and thought about their days so far. When the time was suitable, one would motion the other to gesture another conversation. Such was the activity of fishing. Billette enjoyed it to herself, but with a friend, she found it much more enriching. One of my students is seriously self-conscious about her performance. Poor girl didn't make it spectacularly on her last exam, so I offered a tutoring session to help her out. I spent most of my evening doing that. At this, Flane stopped thinking of her inner worries, and was curious of Billette's activities. Did Professor Hanneman and Manuela not both stop their tutoring because of this month's challenges? Yeah, they did, and I was told by both of them that I was crazy for doing this, but I wanted to help everyone. I spent all of last month helping another student, not even from my own class, so I felt bad. She was telling me herself that she couldn't thank me enough the whole time, but I just told her it was my job. I had to do it. I think it is remarkable that you could carry on for so long. With everything happening around us, you still took it to yourself to assist your student. I want to do everything I can for them. Brother's busy with resolving what that whole letter was talking about, so I thought it was okay for me to slack off for a bit on the whole panic thing. All the knights are doing that for me, anyway. No professor I have ever seen has done such a thing. You're an ideal candidate for such a role, and I don't think I have ever seen someone more suitable than you. It's fine, honestly. I still have a long way to go. I'm far from the perfect professor. She suddenly felt a grip from her rod. What would you define as the perfect professor, then? Billette was slightly stammered by this question. She completely forgot of the fish that had left the hook. The perfect professor, huh? Honestly, I think they should always be willing to help. I think they should succeed all the time, or die trying. They should be super smart, and super strong. They should know of the dangers battle has, and they should just be the best motivators that they can to help their students even when they're down in the dumps. Are those not qualities you possess? I'm not strong, and I'm not smart. I cower easily, and I can't look at blood for that long before feeling shaken. Even when I tried to help my student today, I still saw she had her own doubts. It dawned on Flame that not everyone was having an easy time passing through their lives. She saw Billette as someone almost perfect, but her humble nature had revealed more than she had expected to find out. She stayed silent for a moment before speaking once more. You do not think highly of yourself. That, I can tell. I just want to be honest with myself. She turned back to her friend. What about you? Why were you so gloomy today, Flame? I suppose it is only right to speak with honesty after such a brave display from you. And so she went on. I feel trapped. The grip my brother has on me is one with care, and even if I am aware that I have it far better than most, it still pains me to be under seclusion. I simply wanted to be depended on. I want more than anything to make new friends and explore new scenery, but I cannot do so without him patrolling my every move. Have you talked to him about it? I have. On both delicate and demanding terms, but he was always quick to brush me aside. Lady Rhea says he has his reasons, but even that excuse runs through thin waters. She was saddened once more. Billette noticed yet another fish coming towards the two, but before she could focus her attention on it, she faced Flame to make an offering. An idea has popped up in her mind, and although it was a strange one, she thought it worth a shot. Facing Flame, she gave a gentle smile. I'll make Seath trust me, and then it'll be me and you doing those things, okay? She was taken aback by this proposal, but Billette continued anyway. I know the guy's out for me and brother's blood right now, but that doesn't matter. Once a few months pass by without us doing anything stupid, he'll have only himself to blame if you're never in harm's way around me. Hold on for a little more. I'll come soon to break you out. That's very generous of you, but are you willing to do such an action? Friends do it all the time. By now, a tug had been made. Billette jolted upright in excitement. She quickly passed the rod to her friend. Hold on to it. I'll be behind you, and we'll push it together. Wait, Flame stammered. Are you really trusting that you will make me part of the frontal assault? Your bro's not here, so I say go. She shouted this time in excitement. Flame was in a panic. She did not want to disappoint, however. Billette did not grab onto her yet. At this present moment that the beastly creature below was within their grasp, it was all up to her to help capture it. With all her might, she pulled. She did so with the hardest of mights, however, the fish fought back. It was large, and it had no regrets about retaliating. She struggled. Just then, she felt a sudden lash of strength. Her whole body went flying in a second, but just before it could fully leave the air, somebody had grabbed it. She looked back, seeing her friend shooting the largest grin she had ever seen her with. Go get Flame. She was shocked, amused, and motivated. She grinned back. I shall give it my all. The two continued helping one another now. As the rod struggled more, it became clear that its strength was waning. More and more, it continued to lose power. The duo took this as their opportunity now to fully strike. With one final tug, a large splash erupted from below as the fish bathed them in their victory from its arrival. It was a large catch. Enough for them both to properly stomach and finish with satisfaction. They were both left breathing with sighs of relief at their large prize. Finally, they had caught it. It was exhilarating for Flame. She looked back at Billette, who was chuckling at the two's strength. "That makes tomorrow's lunch," she joked. "Meet me at lunch tomorrow. I'll have it cooked by then." "That's a promise." It was finally nightfall. Seath, having finished his work, could only hope his sister was still at home. With any luck, she would have calmed down and remained peacefully neutral as she always had. Their abode was near the academy. It was a short walk from the town nearby, and an even shorter walk to work at the breaking of the night. Walking back, Seath sighted his sister. She had yet to notice him. He looked down, guilty at his behavior, but then heard some chatter from beyond. "Thank you for everything, Billette." Now facing upwards once more, he was shocked to see another individual with her so late at night. "Truthfully, my mother had always enjoyed fishing with me. Today reminded me much of her mannerisms, and I much enjoyed it. I do miss her, but I also know such a time cannot be fully relived." "I'm sorry to hear," Billette replied. "If she raised you and Seath, then I think she must have been a lovely person." She was the loveliest of all of them. Enthusiasm sounded from her voice. When hearing talk of her in such a way, Seath felt warm listening to her with such cheer. It had been a while since she was so happy. "Brother always uses her name in our arguments. I always hated it. To me, it was feeling as if he used her as a tool after her passing. I feel he wanted me to stay with him, and so he adopted her name to make it so." "You make it sound evil," Billette commented. Finally inching closer, Seath saw that Billette had knelt down to level herself with Flame. "I don't know anything about my own mother, to be honest. My father never felt it was right to talk about her, so I could be completely wrong, but it won't stop me from thinking you're wrong, either." Flame stammered from this response, but Billette continued. "If Seath remembers her the same way you do, then he just wants to make sure you're safe so she can continue resting in peace. I think he always brings her name up because he just wants you to understand that you won't just be hurting him, but also your mother, too. He wants to make sure both her children can continue living their best, so that she has no regrets, even after death." Flame was stammered. She looked down in guilt, but Billette had once more done her irritating habit of prodding Flame's hair for her attention. "You think I'm right? Did I hit the nail on the head, or was I a little over my boundaries? I think you have a point. I just do not like entertaining the idea that I must admit such a case." Flame could not find much else to add, but gratitude. "Thank you for the fresh perspective, Professor. It's what friends do." They both opened the door to the house. At this point, Billette stopped herself and began to say her goodbyes. "Get some sleep. I need to head back to my own dorm later. Till next we meet." "Of course." Flame agreed. "Save that fish, or I shan't be allowing for you to kidnap me on another outing again." "It's a kidnapping now, huh? Guess I'm more evil than Seath originally thought." Billette laughed, joking to herself. It managed to make even Flame chuckle. "All right, then. I'll hold the fish ransom till you pay me a visit." "Yes. That would be most appreciated." At this point, Flame began closing the door. "Good night, Billette." "Sweet dreams, Flame." The door shut gently. Billette took some time to stare at the house, admiring its quality. Before making her leave, Seath had finally made himself aware. She noticed him immediately, however, could not come up with a suitable excuse for her appearance. "Thank you for taking care of her," he admitted. "I would normally be upset over you allowing her such a dangerous activity, but I feel for now you have redeemed yourself with those final words." "I just hope I didn't overstep my boundaries," Billette commented, finally easing herself. "I do such actions far too often, so once or twice for you should be no issue." In confidence, he spoke to Billette and Billette alone. "I will admit, I still dislike your sudden promotion to professors. You and your brother have astounded and belittled mine and everyone else's work just by a good word from Rhea, but considering I trust the Archbishop with my life, I felt it rude to make rid of you. Even now, after all you have done, I want to begin to trust you and Professor Byleth, however, my role forbids me from doing so. I understand. Honestly, Catherine hated me for the exact same reason. It scares me, but I think everyone in the academy hates us. When saying this, Seath felt guilt cross his insides, but he continued listening to Belletta's words. I'm going to do what I can to prove to you all that we can do it. No matter how capable we are, you'll still hate us, but I'm doing it anyway. I want to give you a reason to trust me. I promised Flane I would, so I could take her anywhere she wanted to go. I promised her I'd free her from you. At this, she pointed towards Seath, imposing all she could from her stance. Wait for my arrival. You'll have no excuse not to trust me after I'm done with you. Seath laughed. He laughed hard, which only led to Billette looking at him with the utmost of confused expressions. After calming down, he smiled at her. Do your best. Keep yourself safe first, and only then can I fully entrust you to protect my sister. I dislike you, but I also do not want you sacrificing yourself. I will. Thank you. She felt strange hearing such kind words from a seemingly imposing man as Seath. I've got sleep to catch up on, but till next I need to annoy you, yeah? Indeed. Make sure you do it correctly next time, for both your sake, and Flane's. Billette motioned her head downwards in a violent thrust of determination. Leaving him be, she felt oddly frightened at the memory of her challenging such a foe as Seath. Well, it was over now. She would worry about it later. That was the plan she had in mind. Returning back to her dorm room, she too had said her goodbyes to the night. In a matter of seconds, she felt her eyes drift away as she fell into a deep slumber. Check the description for the links to the author.